Have you ever wanted your own FIFA World Cup trophy? I didn't, but I made one anyway, out of gold filament. Let's take a closer look. Hello everyone, my name's Adam and welcome back to the channel. And today we're taking a look at this, obviously, my FIFA World Cup trophy that I made from Filamentive's Gold Filament. And it's bloody marvellous. Let me show you how I made it. The first thing we need to do once we've imported our model is to remove any errors. So we go to Analysis, Inspector, and then Auto Repair. And that will repair any issues with the model. And it looks like there aren't actually any with this one, so that's all very nice. Now that we've repaired the file, we know we're not going to have too many issues with editing it. So the first thing we're going to do is slice it up. To do that, we go to Edit, Plane Cut. This has created a plane which we can drag up and down and move to the spot where we need to cut it. And then we just change this to Slice, so we're keeping both parts, and then Accept. And that's now created a slice. You can't see it at the moment because it's infinitesimally small. Now that we've done all our plane cuts, we need to separate those new shells into their individual parts. So to do that, we click Separate Shells. This brings up the Object Browser window, which allows you to see each shell individually. The next thing we need to do is make sure we have somewhere to put our weight on the inside, because we don't want just the printed part mass, we want some additional steel in there to make it feel heavier. To do that, we click Mesh Mix, and we're going to create a cylinder. We just drag that in. Now that's a lot bigger than we need it, so we need to reduce the size. In this case, let's just use 16mm by 16mm. Notice here that actually the orientation is different, so we want our length to be about maybe 250, and the size here will be back to 16 again. And that creates a cylinder 250mm long and 16mm in diameter. Now that we've set the size, we can move it into place using the drag tool. Just shift that around like that. You'll need to rotate your view just to make sure you're getting it in the right place. So now that we've placed our cylinder down the inside, we actually need to cut it out from each of these parts. To do that, we'll have to do it one at a time, and it will get rid of this feature as we do that. So before we do it, we need to duplicate it. So we can do that just by clicking this duplicate button, and that will create copies of that part in exactly the same place, exactly the same size. What we're going to do now is use the cylinder that we placed in the middle of the model to cut a hole down through it. So let's hide all the parts that we don't currently need, because we can only do these one at a time. Select first the shell and then the part you want to cut from it. Then select Edit and Boolean Difference. Wait for it to do some calculation, and you'll want to make sure you turn off Auto Reduce Result, because otherwise it will have a tendency to fill in this hole because it thinks you probably don't actually want a hole all the way through. It'll just create a little divot, so just untick Auto Reduce, and that'll probably do. It's now created a nice hole all the way down the middle where we can insert our rod. We now need to repeat that process for all the other parts. So at this point you should now have 5 separate shells, and 4 of them should have holes down the middle. Now that we've done that, we need to repeat all of that process again for 3 extra smaller rods down the middle, just for alignment during assembly. So we go Mesh Mix, Cylinder, drag it in. We want to have this one, so we're going to use 1.75mm filament, give us some space for tolerance and glue, and let's say 2.1. So 2.1 by 2.1 by about, say, 30mm. And now we're just going to move that into the model, and we want to position it so that we can contact all the parts. We don't want it sticking out the bottom, and we don't want it sticking out the sides. And then, as we did with the larger rod, make some copies, cut them out of each of the parts, and then job's a good one. Once you've done that, it should look like this, where you have still your 5 separate shells, no extra spare parts, and if you start hiding things, you'll see your alignment holes for assembly and your large clearance hole for any steel rod you want to put down the middle as weight. The base should only have the alignment holes because we don't want the weighted rod to go through the bottom, so we'll just keep this one solid. The last thing we need to do is export each of these shells as an STL. So the first thing we need to do is hide all the ones that we don't want to export, select the one we do want to export, click File, Export, make sure the Save As type is set to STL, save it as a suitable file name, and then click Save. That will save that visible mesh, as an STL. Repeat that process for each of the shells and then you'll be good to go. As you can see, I've used two filaments here, a sort of darkish green and this gold filament. The gold is from Filamentive. It's this lovely sort of orangey yellow colour with a slight sort of fleck in it, a goldy sort of fleck, which gives it a nice reflection in the light. It looks really quite nice. The other darker green is a cheap ABS I found on Amazon. It was going to be PLA, but I accidentally ordered the wrong thing. And it also jammed up my Mark III, so I wasn't best pleased about that. So there won't be any link for that filament because I don't recommend it at all. However, for the Filamentive, there is a link in the description if you want to get some of this gold PLA for yourself. You don't need a hardened nozzle, so it prints on pretty much anything. The main part of the model here that you can see from the very top down to the first green section, I tried printing on both the Mark III and the Ender III, just to see which one would print better. And actually, the one I've used is the one off the Ender III. The Mark III seemed to take longer to print this, and the bed also seemed to wobble more, so as it got up to this height here, parts of the globe on the Mark III version look a little bit fuzzy, which is not the best. The gluing process was not the easiest thing in the world. I didn't have too much trouble. There's a bit of extra oozing out than I would have liked. Preferably, it would have been perfect so that I had exactly the right amount of glue to just sit in there so you didn't change the effect and you kept the nice sort of matte effect of the printed materials. But overall, not too bad at all. The alignment didn't seem to work overly perfectly. I'm not sure if it's because the original model wasn't all perfectly aligned, but there does seem to be some misalignment, so the circles don't all seem to be perfectly concentric, which you don't really notice upon just looking at it. Looks perfectly fine, but when you start looking in detail and you feel it in your hands, you can feel that one side feels slightly different to the other. As I said, not the biggest deal, but it's not quite perfect. So I think all that's left to say is thank you very much Filamentive for sending me this gold filament. It looks bloomin' marvellous, and I think you'll agree this is probably one of the best applications for that filament. If you want to see more from me, like and subscribe, click the notifications if you want to. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram if you want to see some behind the scenes. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.